What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And obviously, I did a live stream yesterday and reacted to yesterday's game with you guys in the live chat. And we had a lot of fun kind of reacting to that game and losing our minds together over the New York Giants falling out of the first overall selection. But I'm here today to sit down with Alex and get his take on it, discuss the New York Giants going from pick 1 now all the way down to pick 4 following the Cleveland Browns win yesterday. However, there is still a path to the number 1 overall pick, albeit an unlikely one. The Giants will need a lot of help from some really bad teams, but it is still possible that they move up and select with the number 1 overall pick in the draft. More likely, though, they're going to be picking top 3, and then if that's the case, what do? Where do the Giants go from here? Picking with the 3rd or the 4th overall selection? Can they still land their quarterback? Do they have to trade up? All of those things, we're going to discuss that in today's episode. Now, obviously, I'll get this out of the way. Yesterday's win was disappointing in regards to the fact that the Giants moved down the draft order, but I can't lie to you. It was enjoyable to see good quarterback play from a Giants player. A phenomenal performance from a New York Giants wide receiver. Good special teams play. Like, that was one of the best New York Giants performances in the last decade. Seriously, it was, because it's been a decade of misery for the Giants. I mean, I brought up the stat yesterday on the live stream, Alex. They put it on the Fox broadcast. Drew Lock, he had 300-plus yards, 3-plus passing touchdowns, or actually 4-plus passing touchdowns, and 1-plus rushing touchdown. First quarterback to have that stat line since 2014, Eli Manning. It's been a long time since we saw a quarterback play that well in Giants blue. So I got to give credit to Drew Lock. I also hate you, Drew Lock, for doing what you did, because now the Giants are picking 4th instead of 1st. But at the end of the day, there are some positives to take away from that game. And, a big one being the rookies. Malik Neighbors, Tyrone Tracy looked like absolute stars. And we know that we have a bright future ahead with those guys on the roster. Now we just got to get that quarterback in place. And again, a little bit harder to get that quarterback in place, but still very possible. Alex, how are you feeling after yesterday's win/loss? And what is your outlook now on the upcoming 2025 NFL draft?
Well, today I wake up and I'm wondering what the next week holds. Like you said, next week's going to be a crazy one. Every single team in that top 4 right now is playing a team that already has the division locked up. So it's going to be crazy to see. Like, the Texans are probably going to sit their starters. The Eagles are going to sit their starters. The Bills are going to sit their starters. I even saw the Patriots saying they may sit Drake May the last game of the season to protect his health. So there's like a lot of storylines unfolding right now. The Giants could go where they are 4 right now. If they win and other teams lose, they could drop down to the 8 or 9 range. And like, we're talking about some really scary stuff right now, but where I get, and I'm going to stay calm and collected today, I'm going to try to be optimistic in a way that, I mean, this is probably the episode where, like, I could be the most negative ever, but I'm going to try not to be, because, listen, the draft is a crapshoot, and at the end of the day, we don't know if Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders are going to work out or pan out in the NFL. We just simply don't know. Oh, yeah, we would have loved to have the first overall pick, and we would have loved to just take the quarterback and, move on and stuff like that, but I mean, even the Bears had that. They had the first overall pick. They had another top 10 pick. They got Romo Dunes. They got Caleb Williams, and they still look like crap this year. So, I mean, their future is much brighter because they have these young pieces in place. But, like, just getting these players doesn't mean you're going to be good. It gives you a better chance to be and a better long-term outlook. But the Giants, there are ways to go about this where I think it won't matter in the future. Like, what's great now or would have been ideal now may not matter in 3 or 4 years. But my scariest thought is that the Giants are going to let Joe Schoen, who is on the hot seat objectively, mortgage our future to get a quarterback. That's what I think will probably happen at this point, because, I mean, you guys, as well as me and Anthony, we know that they have to draft a quarterback. We know they have to turn the page. We know they have to go in the position, go towards the direction of getting sustainable performance at the position. Now, that doesn't mean the Giants could draft a quarterback. They could go into free agency and maybe get Kirk Cousins on a cheap deal. They could probably get Russell Wilson on a cheap deal. They need a quarterback now. They could get Justin Fields on a 1-year deal. They could go after one of these like bridge options with experience and just go BPA, and just take the best player. Like, if they end up drafting 3, just take Travis Hunter, or just, whatever you want to do, you could just do that. So, the Giants, there are ways here to say, like, okay, we can get competent quarterback play. If Malik Neighbors can put up 171 yards and 2 touchdowns with Drew Lock, there's like 4 other options on this planet that could easily upgrade that quarterback position in free agency. Is it the direction I want to go? Absolutely not. I wanted to get Cam Moore. That's Anthony. That's our guy. It's still not out of the question it could happen. It's possible that the league is much lower on these quarterbacks than the public, right? It's possible that the Raiders are like, we don't like these guys enough to mortgage our future on them. It's possible that one of these teams that don't, of course, Deshaun Watson, they just restructured his deal. I'm curious to see if the Browns want a quarterback. Tennessee, they clearly hate Will Levis. Like, I just don't think that he's going to be the future there. They could draft a quarterback too. But maybe trading up, depending on how this thing unfolds, maybe that's not what these teams want to do because maybe they're not worth it. And the Patriots, maybe they're not going to get a haul to move back a couple of spots. Maybe they just go BPA, take Travis Hunter, and live to see another day. They don't risk losing out on a player of that magnitude. Who knows? Anything could happen. A lot of time here. I'm playing devil's advocate because I'm freaking depressed right now, but I'm trying to be optimistic and say, like, what could happen that may be unexpected. Now, quarterbacks are a luxury, Anthony. We know teams always trade up for them. But in another draft like last year, I don't even think Shedeur Sanders is a top 20 pick. I think he's worse than J.J. McCarthy, worse than Michael Penix, and worse than Bo Nix. That's how I see Shedeur Sanders in another draft class. I don't even think he's top 20. But in this draft class, he's probably a top 5 because of the need, necessity, and lack of talent. Cam Ward, I think, is probably in the middle of last year's draft class after a year like this with Miami. I think he's in the middle of the pack. I think that his upside is something that teams are going to gravitate to and risk it all for because you see some of the things he does. And I know the bowl game doesn't really mean much. I'm not going to use that as as a stock driver for Sanders or Ward. But what it did say to me was that one of those guys came and showed up in a big moment, and Sanders struggled. And a couple of those sacks were his fault. I watched the game. He had a couple of nice throws. I saw some nice plays. I'm not saying Sanders is bad. I'm just saying I think I've been saying this all along. I think Sanders' floor is higher, but his ceiling is lower. I'm willing to take the shot. I want to take the shot on the quarterback with the higher ceiling. I think that's Cam Ward. Personally, others may disagree. If we end up with Shedeur Sanders, I'm going to root for the guy. I'm just happy to have a young quarterback that has upside and potential and someone that's on a rookie contract that's going to keep the costs low at quarterback. I can root for that, right? I'm going to be bought in, whoever we get at quarterback, because it's just a new face, some reason to be optimistic. I just have my preferences like everybody else does. But Anthony, looking at the situation right now and where the Giants sit 4th overall, it's definitely a scary spot to be in. The biggest fear for me, and I'll get your take on this, is that we're going to let Joe Schoen, who's already on the hot seat, probably mortgage our future to get a quarterback. That is going to either set us up for the next decade or it's going to set us back another 5 years. That pinnacle moment on draft day is going to be what determines the future for us for the next half decade. And that is really scary to me because you give away a 2026 first round pick to move up and get Sanders or Ward, you better freaking know that guy is going to be good. Because if he's not, we're in purgatory for quite a long time. So Shane's got a hell of a situation unfolding for him, assuming that he's retained. And at this point, I'm not getting the sense that they're going to fire him, despite the fact I think that that's probably the best way to go.
Yeah, I don't think they are going to fire Joe Schoen at this point. I mean, maybe they will. To be completely honest with you, I don't know what the New York Giants are planning on doing. I think that John Mara, I don't know if you saw the report, Alex, he plans on having end-of-season meetings with both Joe Schoen and Brian Dable. He's going to meet one-on-one with them and then judge them based on their own merits. That's the way to go, and I think that he could end up walking out of those meetings feeling like, all right, I'm confident in these guys and I'm keeping them, or he could walk out of that meeting feeling like, okay, they just tried to throw one another under the bus. I don't want this kind of chaos in my building. Let's get rid of them. Let's start over. So I really don't know who's going to be making these picks for the Giants in the 2025 NFL draft. But what I do know is, you're right, the New York Giants have a very pivotal draft ahead of them. They have to find a quarterback, whether that's in the first round, second round, third round. They have to take a quarterback at some point in 2025. Even if they go out in free agency, Alex, and they sign a Justin Fields or a Russell Wilson or a Kirk Cousins, it doesn't matter. That's just your bridge. You still have to go out there and draft a quarterback anyway. So the Giants will be spending a premium draft pick on the quarterback position. Now, the question is, will they be spending a premium draft pick, or will they be trading up to gain a more premium draft pick and take that quarterback? That's the big question mark. And some of the things you said there, I'll try and respond to. Like, one thing that I'll kind of push back on, I don't think that the Giants will be stuck in purgatory for a long time if they end up missing on the quarterback position. I know that's how Giants fans are feeling right now because we just went through the whole Daniel Jones saga. The problem with Daniel Jones being drafted by the Giants wasn't the fact that they drafted him. It's the fact that after 2 to 3 years, we knew what we had in him, and we knew that his ceiling wasn't going to raise by all that much, and we stuck with him anyway. The Giants, after 2 years of Daniel Jones, should have probably figured it out. They probably should have went out there and found at least a backup plan. They haven't drafted a quarterback since 2019, Alex. That, to me, is absurd, and I've brought that up many times. The fact that it's been 6 years since the Giants even drafted a quarterback, I mean, just because you took a franchise quarterback number 6 overall, doesn't mean you stop throwing darts at the board. You have to keep trying to find backup plans at the quarterback position. What if Jones doesn't pan out? Well, at least we have this young rookie that we selected in the 3rd round in 2022. No, the Giants don't have any of that, and that's part of the problem. So if they end up moving up and drafting Shedeur Sanders number 1 overall this year, and he ends up setting a league worst record for QBR in his rookie season, and you're picking number 1 again, or maybe you wouldn't be picking number 1 because you wouldn't have that draft pick, well, you stick with him for another year, you hope that he turns around, and if he doesn't, after 2 years of Sanders, you're back in the market for another quarterback, and that's how it goes. You're not putting yourself in purgatory for 6 years. That's got to be the lesson that the New York Giants have from the Daniel Jones situation. It's not the fact that, oh, we failed Daniel Jones. It's the fact that you failed yourselves because you didn't move on quickly enough. I always say it. In business, you hire slowly and you fire quickly. It's the same thing with a quarterback. You go through a slow hiring process, the pre-draft process. You do these interviews, you do these workouts, and you do all this film studying and research. That's your hire slowly. And then, when you get to the quarterback in the building, if he doesn't play well after a couple of years, you fire quickly and you move on. Because here's the thing, Alex. A lot of fans want to point to the Jets, for example, and say, man, they should have given Geno Smith more time. They should have given Sam Darnold more time. No amount of time in the New York Jets organization would have been enough for Sam Darnold or Geno Smith to have their career turnarounds. They literally would never have accomplished what they're accomplishing now with the New York Jets. And the same can be said about Daniel Jones. If he moves on, Alex, and he becomes a franchise quarterback for another team, that's great for him, but it wasn't going to happen here. So you do have to move on quickly because the change of scenery is what's causing all of these quarterbacks to have these breakouts later on. It's not the fact that they've been in the NFL now for 6 years. It's that they've been in the NFL, been around the NFL to other teams and landed in the right situation for them personally. So you don't just try and force it to work with a quarterback over the course of a half of a decade. After 2-3 years, you know that he's not going to work out here, you move on. So that's just the one thing that I'll say, like you mentioned, purgatory. The Giants are in purgatory right now because they do not have a quarterback of the future. But if you get a guy and you have to move on from him after 2 years, if he's so bad that you have to move on from him, you're probably already picking high enough in the draft to move on from him anyway. And that's the key takeaway for the Giants. So, but then it comes back to the question. Let's say Sanders or Ward, whoever, has a incredibly bad rookie season and you want to move on after a year. You want to fire Shane, you want to fire Dable, but now you no longer have that draft pick. That is a cause for concern, and that makes it really difficult to manage your future, and that's why the Giants need to be careful about what they give up in this upcoming trade if they do make one to move up and draft a quarterback. But another thing you mentioned, Alex, that I want to touch on. First of all, you said Will Levis's name right. Congrats, because I feel like it's been a while since you said his name properly. But talking about the Tennessee Titans, the Browns, all these teams in front of the Giants, I'm not convinced that the Browns are taking a quarterback. I don't know if you saw, I know you mentioned that they restructured Deshaun Watson's contract, but they actually restructured it in a way that makes it impossible to move on from him in 2025. The idea behind that was they plan on building around him for at least another year. So I don't think they're going to be drafting a quarterback. The Patriots aren't drafting a quarterback. So then it's really just up to the Giants and the Titans. And if you're like me, Alex, I just want one of the two guys. I prefer Cam Ward. I'll take Shedeur Sanders. So whoever the Titans don't take, if they're picking ahead of us, give me the other guy and I am happy. But I don't think there's much of a threat from the teams behind the Giants because I don't think teams are going to be willing to sacrifice a whole lot to move up in this year's draft for these quarterbacks because like you said earlier, they're not the same caliber of quarterbacks that we saw in last year's draft. Drake May, that's a guy you mortgaged a first for. That's a guy I was willing to mortgage 2 firsts for. Giants weren't willing to do that. Now they don't have a Drake May. But Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, maybe I'd mortgage a first, but probably not 2. So it's not exactly the same caliber of draft class, and that's why I don't think the Giants have to be too worried about teams jumping up in front of them. And one last point that I'll make on that as well, Alex. Last year, we heard a lot of chatter. These teams are going to be trading up. The Vikings are coming up to number 4. The Giants are going to have to trade up. Oh, the Broncos are going to trade all the way up to the 5th pick. The Giants have to trade up if they want their quarterback. None of that happened. The Giants were able to stick and pick at 6. They still could have taken McCarthy, could have taken Nix, ended up taking Neighbors. Or Penix. They could have taken him as well. But that's my point. We always hear this chatter. Teams are anxious. Teams are aggressive. They're going to trade up and they're going to make these moves. And a lot of the times they don't because they don't see the value in mortgaging their future. And so for the Giants, if you're picking in the top 3 or 4, you're probably safe. You probably don't have to worry about teams jumping in front of you. Now, on the off chance that you do, you make that move. You call those teams in front of you and you say, hey, if you're getting any calls for your pick, let us know first so we have the opportunity to match it. But if you're not getting calls, we're going to stick and pick and we're going to take the quarterback anyway. And I do think that's a very realistic way for all of this to shake out when we get to April's draft.
It absolutely is. I mean, we don't know who is going to be moving where, which way. We don't even know what the draft outlook's going to look like after next week. It could shake up entirely. But with that being said, it's interesting. Like, what I have to say about Joe Schoen is that I hope, Anthony, I pray to God he's learned from his catastrophic mistakes already. You know, he put together one of the worst quarterback rooms I've seen in my lifetime. And we have to pray that he has learned from these mistakes. You know, he said it blatantly, verbatim. I've made mistakes so far. Like, he said it himself. So I just hope he's been able to learn from them. And his sales pitch to John Mara about why they should stay. And I also want to point out one take, and I want to get your opinion on this actually, and you guys in the comment section as well, because I was thinking about it. The Giants not having the first overall pick is actually good for Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, because if you fire both those guys, a new regime is coming in here not having the ability to take the quarterback they want. They're going to have to trade up to get them. So I think that does hurt the ability to go out and hire like the cream of the crop, because now they can't just take the quarterback and build around him. They would have to mortgage their own future to get it done. I think it would have been a more attractive destination for any other head coach or general manager if they had that first overall pick, because the Giants already aren't really a sought-after destination because of, well, them being the Giants right now, but more so, now you make it even less attractive because you can't just take the quarterback. So that's a bit of a kind of interesting idea I had, and I don't know your opinions on it, if it matters or not, but I do think it does matter for the cream of the crop, because there are a lot of teams in the market for new head coaches and GMs. You're not going to be able to get one of those guys, you know, without that top pick, with already a spotty roster to begin with, and a culture that needs to be rebuilt. So, you know, Anthony, in that kind of context, I think it helped Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll to win this game big time, because now the Giants are a less attractive destination than they were yesterday before the game. So kind of an interesting thought process, but I want to get your take on that one.
It is an interesting thought process, and my take on it is going to be a take that we've had recently. I'm just going to fall back to something that we've said. The Giants are more attractive if you have the number one overall pick, because you can do anything with a number one overall pick. If you're picking 3 or 4, your options become a little bit more limited, and that's the problem for both Joe Schoen and a potential new GM. Now, you're right in the sense that the Giants winning that game definitely increased the chances of Schoen and Daboll coming back next year. It increased their chances because it was a culture win that they can pitch to ownership, and it also increased their chances because, yes, now the Giants are a less attractive option for potential GM and head coach candidates. But what I will say, Alex, if the Giants were picking number one overall with a new regime, we said that they have the opportunity to either take their quarterback number one and definitively say this is our guy, or they had the opportunity to try and trade down and get really creative and bring in a new haul. A new GM doesn't need to take a quarterback because their back isn't against the ropes the same way that Joe Schoen was. That was the argument that we made for the Giants picking number one. It's the same argument for picking number 3 or number 4. If the Giants are picking at 3rd or 4th overall, they don't have to mortgage their future and move up and get a quarterback if they have a new GM. The new GM might say, hey, I view this as more of a long-term rebuild. I'm not sold on this quarterback class. I'm going to go ahead and wait for 2026, and I'm going to rebuild this roster in the meantime and hope that I'm in position to draft my guy next offseason. That's another kind of perspective that you can take for a new GM entering this Giants situation. If they were picking number 1, very likely they're just going to take the best quarterback available. But what if they decide, hey, I don't like these quarterbacks. I don't believe in these guys. I want to wait for 2026. That's now a lot easier to do if you're picking number 3 or number 4. So new GM coming in could be picking 3 or 4. Trade down, stick and pick, take the best defensive player available. All of the options are back on the table for a new GM coming in. But if you keep Schoen, you got to take a quarterback, and that's the reality for the Giants. They don't have a choice, and that's what I'm afraid of. I don't want a general manager here who's got his back against the ropes, who's standing on thin ice, who has to make desperate moves in order to save his job. Because this Giants team, in my opinion, despite yesterday's 45-point outing and win over the Colts, this is not a team that's going to be ready to compete legitimately in 2025 regardless of who is throwing the ball. I mean, seriously, even if the Giants strike gold the same way that the Commanders did and they get a Jaden Daniels level quarterback, I don't think that quarterback is going to have that level of success and impact for the New York Giants because their roster is not currently built for that. And neither is their coaching staff. Question marks all over the place. New OC is going to be coming in. New DC is coming in. Giants are a mess right now. This is not a situation like what the Commanders had. And I get it. We say all the time, Alex, that Jaden Daniels turned the Commanders around overnight. So did new ownership, a new GM, and a new coaching staff. So they had a lot of change overnight. It wasn't just Jaden Daniels. If the Giants keep the GM, keep the coach and most of the coaches, and then they plug in the quarterback, they didn't have that overnight change. They just got a quarterback. So you realistically can't expect a Jaden Daniels level spark from that rookie quarterback for the New York Giants in 2025, which is why I make the point. The Giants aren't ready to compete next year. This is more of a long-term build. But Joe Schoen needs to compete next year, has to win games in order to save his job. So he might make a lot of short-sighted, desperate decisions at the top of the draft and in free agency that over the long run might hurt the New York Giants more than it helps them. But a new GM coming in who has at least 3 years to build will know, hey, I've got time. I don't have to rush anything. I can treat this as a long-term rebuild. And he might make more calculated decisions with winning now and then in mind rather than buying wins immediately in order to save a job. So that's why I still advocate for cleaning house, getting rid of Joe Schoen. Yesterday's win does not change anything for me. It doesn't make me more confident in Schoen and Dable. It doesn't change a thing. They still went on a 10-game losing streak. They just happened to have one good game. And the fact that it took them 10 weeks to have one good game tells me everything I need to know about this regime. So going forward, I'm still pro clean house, but you do make a great point. Joe Schoen and Brian Dable might have bought themselves some time with that win, but at the same time, it's still going to be a move that causes them to think with a short-sighted frame of mind in the upcoming offseason.
Yeah, I'm not being blinded by that win. That win was a consolation prize at the end of a losing season. You know, it was the Indianapolis Colts laying down and dying. I mean, their defense looked incompetent. But, you know, with that being said, I also am still pro clean house. And the reason I am is because I want a new regime to step in and be objective about the development and progression of this team. Joe Schoen is already cornered into making the only decision he can make, drafting a quarterback. And it's going to mean mortgaging our future. And your head coach and general manager being on the hot seat and making that decision is just bad practice in every sense of the word. You know, every sense of bad practice, that's what it is. You know, letting guys that are already half out the door make the decision that's going to determine the next 5 years of your franchise. I think that you bring in a new regime not because you want a quarterback, but because they're going to make an objective analysis on how to rebuild. And listen, if Joe Schoen goes out and signs Russell Wilson and takes BPA, I'm going to be like, dude, like, why? Like, why would you do that? Because you know that your whole plan is predicated on young quarterback development and having a rookie contract. And Anthony, the funny thing is, they have to now spend money. If they're not going to draft a quarterback, they have to spend money on a starter and they have to sign another backup. They're going to end up spending, $25 million on a backup and a starter at the quarterback position. So you can kiss goodbye to any wide receiver additions or cornerback additions that mean worth a damn. So that's kind of a situation where, like, the financial aspect of it, they're still paying Daniel Jones $20 million next year. Like, they're going to allocate a ton of money towards a starter and a backup if they don't draft a quarterback. So what I will say is this: if you bring in a new regime and they decide the best way to go about our plan is to skip on a quarterback this year, maybe even move back a couple spots, or taking BPA, like top defensive tackle or cornerback, Will Johnson or Mason Graham, you go after one of those guys, you live to see another day. Like, I can wrap my head around that because it's part of their plan from day one. It's not Joe Schoen's plan in year 4 trying to, rebound and do something different. And it doesn't have to do with the losing and crap that we've seen over the last 3 years. It has to do with starting from scratch and a plan that's going to develop over the course of several years, and not a plan that's already been proven to be debunked. And now we're restarting it all over again with a guy we don't trust. I could understand going PPA with a new regime. I cannot understand Joe Schoen not taking a quarterback at this point because his back's against the wall. You know what I mean? Gun to the head. Like, he's got to make this decision. And you go and get Russell Wilson, Anthony. You go and get Justin Fields. You're in purgatory, most likely, because now you're like a 6-7 win team, not making the playoffs, and just you're drafting middle of the pack. And you want to go get a quarterback, you have to give up at least 2 first-round picks to go up to top 5 and get one now. So you're just kind of in purgatory. the Giants have found themselves in what is a bewildering situation where they kind of have no choice but to go up and get a quarterback, the one that they want. And listen, if you're going to go up and get a quarterback, Anthony, you go up and get the guy that you have conviction in. I want Cam Ward. Am I okay with Shedeur Sanders? Yeah, but the only reason I'm okay with this is just me personally. You guys could have it opposite, and I respect that opinion. Like you could say it opposite. Like I want Shedeur Sanders, and if we end up with Cam Ward, like I don't want to end up with my second option. I'm either going and getting the guy I believe in, or I'm not taking a quarterback at all. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of how I see it right now. I'm not going for option number 2. I'm going for option number 1, or I'm not getting that guy. I can't sit here and act. I don't know what the Giants think about these two quarterbacks, though. They could have them similarly graded. In that case, it's a different scenario.
Well, I differ on that. I don't agree with that. I think if you're picking in the range to take a quarterback, you throw the dart at the board, and you hope that even if you don't fully believe in him, whatever you think is wrong with him, you're wrong about. That's how you got to do it, in my opinion. Like I always say, taking Daniel Jones number 6 overall wasn't bad practice. Forcing him to try and work for 6 years was terrible practice. That was the mistake. But taking a quarterback when you're picking number 6 overall isn't a mistake. The Giants, if they're picking high, should take a quarterback. I said this past offseason, and honestly, I mean, this is the same conversation we had in April, Alex. You weren't willing to take J.J. McCarthy at 6. You said, I'm not forcing it on a player I don't believe in. I said, I'm taking J.J. McCarthy at number 6 because I need to have a long-term plan at quarterback more than anything. Now we have Malik Neighbors, and I'm thrilled about that, and I think he's the best player from that draft class. Great selection, but we still don't have a quarterback, and I'm just of a different mindset. I think that if you are picking in the range for a top quarterback, even if you don't fully believe, you hope that you're wrong in not fully believing, and you hope that that quarterback is better than you project him to be. That's my opinion and take on it. And I think that's more of a modern, progressive idea and approach that we've seen some teams take recently. It's worked for a number of them. It's backfired for a number of them as well. But also for the teams that it's backfired on, I mean, look at the Steelers. They did exactly that when they took Kenny Pickett, right? They probably didn't fully believe in Kenny Pickett, but they stuck there and they took him anyway. It didn't burn them. They're not in quarterback purgatory or hell for 6 years. The problem isn't the fact that they took Pickett. The problem isn't the fact that they took Pickett. For the Giants, it was that they tried to make their version of a Pickett work in Daniel Jones. The Steelers moved on from Kenny Pickett very quickly. Now they have Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and they are a playoff team with a 10-5 record. So there is a way to take the quarterback that you don't fully believe in and not end up in quarterback hell for 6 years. And this is the point that I'm going to keep stressing and making all offseason long, because I don't think a lot of Giants fans really understand what I'm trying to say when I say it. I think that they're stuck in this old mindset of you don't force the quarterback position. Well, that's because that's what Dave Gettleman said to us years ago, and we all believed it, and we thought that he was right about it, but he was wrong. You do force the quarterback position because it's the most important position, and it's the hardest one to evaluate and project. So you throw the dart at the board, and you pray to God that with your eyes closed, you hit a bullseye. Even if you don't think you threw a bullseye, it's like shooting a basketball, Alex. You ever shoot a three-pointer and you're like, oh, that's off, and then it goes in? Sometimes that happens when you're picking quarterbacks in the draft. You think, oh, that's off, and it goes in anyway. That's what you need to have in terms of a quarterback selection mindset. That's why I wanted to take a quarterback at 6, whether it was McCarthy. I didn't necessarily believe in Bo Nix, Alex, but if Bo Nix was the best guy on the board, I probably still would have taken him because you got to throw darts at the board with the quarterback position. That's my point. That's my take. So I might not necessarily believe in Shedeur Sanders. I don't know. I haven't watched him enough, haven't evaluated his film enough. But when we get to April, I might say I don't think he's a franchise quarterback. I'll take him anyway, because the Giants don't even have a quarterback on their contract next season. So even if they sign a Kirk Cousins, that's not your future. You got to hope that you hit on Shedeur Sanders, even if you don't fully believe in him. But when you select him, you have to put all the pieces around him and hope that he hits. And if after 1 or 2 seasons you know that he's not going to be a hit, you move on. Then you draft another quarterback, and you just keep cycling that door. You keep revolving that door until eventually you get an ace. The Giants have to have that mindset. They didn't have it last time when they selected Daniel Jones. That's what crippled them for the past 6 years. But for me, personally, I'm taking the best quarterback available because that is the biggest need on my roster. And the only time you draft for need is when you need a quarterback. Every other time you go best player available, but when it's a quarterback, you have to throw a dart at the board.
I can agree with that in the context of like we're sitting and picking there. You know what I mean? But like mortgaging your future just for a guy you may not have conviction in, that's where I get really, really uncomfortable. You know what I mean? If we were just sitting at 4, let's say we're drafting 4, just where we are right now, and Shedeur Sanders falls to 4, I'm going to take Shedeur Sanders for sure. but trading up and mortgaging our future picks, because 2026, if what you're saying, now you're gonna have to wait 2 years. You're gonna have to go down this road of waiting 2 years to get the guy because you're not gonna have a 2026 draft pick in the first round. And on top of that, you know, you may not have the same head coach or regime. Like Brian Dable and Joe Schoen get fired 1 year into having Shedeur Sanders, whatever quarterback they traded up to get. Now you become the most unattractive destination for any possible head coach or GM because you're going to be inheriting a quarterback you didn't draft and you don't have a first round pick for 2026. So basically, if John Mara approves keeping Joe Schoen and Brian Dable for next year, it's not just next year. It's got to be a 2-year leash. It has to be guaranteed. A 2-year leash, he's got to see it out to the 5-year deal he signed them to. Because if you mortgage your future, your 2026 draft picks on it, you have to keep him. Because nobody's going to take this job. Nobody. Especially with teams always needing a head coach. They will be the bottom of the barrel. And on top of it, we already know most coordinators don't want to come here. Mike Kafka's leaving. I don't even know what Mike Kafka even does anymore. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Giants do. Are they going to fire Shane Bowen? Because their defense is horrible. Horrible. I know they have lots of injuries and inconsistencies, but they're a bad unit. And, I mean, we saw the drop-off from Deonte Banks from last year to this year. Catastrophic. Like, that's really, really dangerous to go down that road again. I don't know what the path is here for the Giants, guys. Like, I really don't. I'm trying to talk through it, trying to figure it out. But the one thing I'll keep circling back to and being optimistic, this is the one thing I can be optimistic about, is Joe Schoen has made every mistake in the book. Like, every single one at every single juncture. He's let the stars leave. He passed on quarterbacks. He signed bad quarterbacks. He put together horrible draft picks and failure to develop talent with coaching hires, which is his job to hire new coaches. He's made every single mistake in the book. The only optimistic point I can say about this, Anthony, is we just hope he's learned from them. Has he learned from his mistakes? That's going to be what we find out this offseason if they keep him. Has he learned from the catastrophic mistakes and horrid personnel decisions over the last 3 years? Do you have any faith in that? Because that's my question right now, is whether or not I can sit here and convince myself that he's a better GM than he was.
No, I don't have faith in Joe Schoen. I've made that abundantly clear. I don't believe in him as a general manager. I think his mistakes have been too extreme, and I think that his mismanagement of the quarterback position is the problem. He doesn't know how to evaluate the quarterback position, in my opinion. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given Daniel Jones that contract. And I'll fall back on it and say once again, I mean, I don't trust him to make the quarterback position. I don't trust him to make that selection. I don't trust him to make that trade. He's made some good trades. He's made some bad trades. Overall, I don't have faith in Joe Schoen, and I want to clean house. But I will say, if you do stick with him for another year and you draft a quarterback, no, I don't think you have to give him 2 years. You fire quickly. I don't care. This is the point I'm going to keep making. I got to keep saying it until I get it across. Even if you keep this regime, you keep Shane, you keep Dable, and then you draft a quarterback this year, you don't have to give them 2 years to see it out. You don't have to give them 2 years to develop this quarterback. What's the sense in that, to give them another year to mess up the roster, another year to fail to develop that quarterback? Just fire them, trade the quarterback, and select a new one. Because if you're talking about firing them anyway, you're talking about them picking in the top 5 and in range for a quarterback. So you do it again. You take a first-round quarterback back-to-back years. You keep throwing darts at the board. So you and I have a fundamental disagreement here on this idea, and I'm going to stick firm all offseason. This is going to be my take on it. If the Giants draft a quarterback, I'm not married to this quarterback. I'm not expecting them to be here for the next 5 years. I'm going to hope that they are, and I'm going to root for their success because I'm a Giants fan, but I'm also going to sit here and say, if they don't play well as a rookie and the Giants have the first overall pick again, I'm taking the best quarterback available. I'm not going to force it to work with the quarterback that I selected. I'm not going to give Joe Schoen blind confidence and loyalty for an additional year. I'm going to move on from him after a year after selecting his quarterback, and I'm going to take a new quarterback and get a new GM to take that quarterback. That's my take on it. I don't give leashes. I'm not giving a leash to Joe Schoen because you know what? That's what we're talking about here, Alex. We're saying it would be a desperation move. We're saying he's desperate. He has to take a quarterback in order to save his job. I'm not going to let him save his job. He's not gaining a leash just because he selected a quarterback with the first overall pick or the third overall pick, whatever. No leashes. If the quarterback sucks, it means you suck as GM and you're still getting fired and I'm trading the quarterback away. That's my take on it. And I don't know if that's the New York Giants' take on it. I don't know if John Mara is going to get behind that line of thinking. He probably won't. But really, look around the NFL. That is the line of thinking that has allowed teams to become successful. That is the line of thinking that has a team like the Buccaneers in the playoff contention, that has a team like the Eagles being a juggernaut. They selected a quarterback in the second round. You have teams that find ways to throw darts at the quarterback position until they hit. The Giants haven't thrown a dart in 6 years. That is gross. Now, if they throw a dart this offseason and that dart is on the outside of the board, you throw another dart in 26. That's going to be my take on it. So that's probably too doom and gloom, though. It's probably not where Giants fans wanted to hear this conversation go. We probably did get too negative today. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's a negative time to be a Giants fan. We've been bad for 10 years. So screw it. We're going to talk about the negatives and the positives. That's why I started out this episode, Alex. Malik Neighbors, absolute star. And that's why I will have some confidence in whichever quarterback we take, because they're going to be throwing the ball to Malik Neighbors. And it's really hard, in my opinion, to look like a bad quarterback when you have Malik Neighbors as your number one receiver.
It's true. What I'll say about this in terms of if we're out of range to draft a quarterback and we don't want to mortgage the future on it, I do think there's a very high chance the Giants go for a reclamation project. I think that what we're seeing across the league with guys like Sam Darnold and Geno Smith and, there's so many quarterbacks that are like rising from the dead right now. And it's interesting to see how it's going on. I wonder if the Giants would go for a reclamation option like a Justin Fields. I know you're a big Justin Fields fan, Anthony. I know, God, I don't want to go anywhere in the direction of like a Zach Wilson because I think he just doesn't have it anymore. Maybe never did. But the guys like Justin Fields out there, I mean, guys like Russell Wilson, I mean, they're at the twilight of their careers, but they're not really reclamation projects like Kirk and Russ. But Justin Fields is certainly one of those guys that like he's gonna put it all on the field for you. Like you add a Travis Hunter, Malik Neighbors, you could have a pretty dynamic offense with Justin Fields. It's not my preference, but the Giants are like they're probably considering everything. Like maybe. Anthony, what they do is sign a guy like Justin Fields and take and go after like a Jalen Milroe in the back end of the first, or trade up to the back into the first or in the second round if he drops that far. And they go after the guy with an elite trait and they have him sit and learn and develop and get better. And Justin Fields is a really good mentor to have. I mean, yeah, he's not great, but the guy's a freaking gamer, and he's every single locker room that man's been in, they've respected the hell out of him. So he helps your culture big time. Listen, I'm talking alternatives now because I don't really know what the Giants are going to do. I'm just thinking about every possible thing. You guys know I still want Cam Moore. That's still my preference. But the Giants, like, they've positioned themselves now where, like, everything's now an option. I think it's time to start exploring every possible opportunity that they're going to have. So is Justin Fields one of those reclamation projects? Is he a guy that the Giants may say, well, we don't want to trade up and mortgage our future on a quarterback in this draft class. Maybe we take a dart on a reclamation, but maybe throw a dart at a reclamation project. Maybe we take a Travis Hunter and we add a superstar receiver, Heisman winner to a unit that already has Malik Neighbors. You don't have to spend money on the receiver position now. You have a two-way player. Maybe you have him play a little cornerback and he plays a little receiver. I don't know how Travis Hunter is going to translate to the NFL, but I would still go out there and sign DJ Reed. Sign Justin Fields to a 1-year, $10 million deal, maybe even a 2-year, $20 million deal with an out after the first season, and you have yourself an insurance policy, and you wait until 2026. You keep building this roster, getting better, and then you trade up and mortgage your future on a quarterback in 2026 when we know that draft class is going to be substantially better than this one. So is it an option? I don't think it should be ruled out. This is something that is going to be very realistic for the Giants when the time comes, in my opinion.
You're coming full circle. You're about halfway full circle to getting towards my line of thinking and ideas. You're like almost there. I'm like slowly.
No, I just don't want to mortgage.
Side of the table.
Well, no, it's just I don't want to mortgage. I don't want to trade up for a guy that I don't have full conviction. I know it's throwing a dart. I would rather just take a reclamation project and mortgage our future on a draft pick I don't necessarily love.
I wouldn't want to trade up. Like, I'll make that clear. I don't necessarily want to trade up, but I do have conviction in Cam Ward. So I would trade up for Cam Ward.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
I'm not sure where I am with Shedeur Sanders yet.
That's exactly right.
By the time we get to April, I might watch a lot of film, and I might be willing to trade up for him.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure yet, but I do agree with you because this ties into my dart throwing mentality. I need that first round pick because if I don't have full conviction in this quarterback, I need to have my opportunity to take another one the following year. So yeah, I don't necessarily want to trade up, which is why I wanted the Giants to lose yesterday so that we could get the number one pick and just take our quarterback. But unfortunately, we are sitting in a position where now we might have to trade up. And if we do, I want to hopefully keep that 2026 first round pick so that if I don't like the quarterback that I took 1 year later, screw it, I'll take another one. And again, I know these are ideas that Giants fans might not like. It's a new way of thinking. You want to give quarterbacks time to grow and develop. There's the rule of thumb. You give them 25 games. Sure, maybe that's the case, but in the modern NFL, with teams, you saw the Cardinals do it, we've seen other teams do it, you got to take quarterbacks, and you got to keep taking them until you find the one. Justin Fields was the example for the Bears, and now they have Caleb Williams. It took them 2 years. A lot of fans this past offseason, Alex, were saying Justin Fields is still a good quarterback. The Bears should keep developing him. They took Caleb Williams anyway. They have a brighter future because of it. Now Justin Fields has a chance to be a reclamation project, like you mentioned. And for what it's worth, yeah, I think he would be a great idea for the New York Giants as a bridge or as a potential Sam Darnold. You hope that you get a Sam Darnold. At the worst case, though, you get a Jacoby Brissett and you take the guy out of the lineup and you put the rookie in. That's what the Giants need to be looking for. Find your version of a Sam Darnold ceiling and a Jacoby Brissett floor, sign him, still take the quarterback, and then hope that you don't have to do it over again in 2026. But if you do, keep that option available to yourself. Try your best to keep that 2026 first-round draft pick. Mm-hmm. I think that pretty much wraps up our conversation on this. We have a lot to talk about between now and April, and we will talk about all this. There are so many different ways that these dominoes could fall. Usually, Alex, you see dominoes put together, and they create this one pretty picture. It's like you knock one domino over, and you get... This is like a domino where it could fall this way, it could fall that way, maybe this way, and there's 15 different pictures that it could create based on the way that that domino falls, and we just don't know how it's going to fall. But the first domino to fall will be John Mara's decision to keep or fire Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, and that is a decision I think we get later next week. I don't think that he has his mind made up right now, and I don't think he's going to have it made up a week from today on Black Monday in the NFL. I think he's going to have those meetings on Black Monday, and then a few days later, he's going to make his decision. So I know we all want it now. We want to know right now. We want to know what the future holds. I think we still have a little bit more waiting to do, Alex. I think it's going to be a week and some change before we get some clarity on the New York Giants' future.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I find it interesting that we've seen like the Giants have been very, very clear in their interest in both Ward and Sanders, but they haven't, at least as far as I'm concerned in knowledge that we've heard. I mean, Anthony, have we heard them going to see Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe or any other quarterback in person? I haven't seen a single thing about. I don't know if you've heard any different, but I haven't seen any reports about them going to see anybody else but those two guys. So, I mean, that kind of tells us where their head is. Like, they will take one of those two guys if they have the opportunity. Which one will they trade up for if that's the direction they go in? But is there a world where you'd be okay with taking BPA, like if that's a Travis Hunter or Will Johnson or Mason Graham, like taking BPA and then waiting and taking maybe a Jalen Milroe in the second round or trading up into the first to get Jalen Milroe and then signing a Justin Fields as a bridge and like having this like, you know, situation where like you have two guys with upside, you have a much better quarterback room than you did this past year, but like you don't really know where it's gonna go, but you don't mortgage your future on the quarterback position. You get two guys with upside that maybe you hit on the reclamation project, or Jalen Milroe becomes great and he has one elite trait and that's his running qualities. Like, and maybe he develops as a passer, you know, behind the scenes over time. Is that something that you would consider, or are you just like you're risking it all? You're going for the top guy on your board?
I want to go for the top guy on the board. I want to take the quarterback because you take the quarterback early because remember last year Alex had put together that spreadsheet and it showed the hit rate on first-round quarterbacks versus day 2-3 quarterbacks and then the hit rate of wide receivers day 1 versus day 2-3. So you know me. I'm taking the quarterback when I've got an opportunity to in the first round. But is the idea that you just threw out there something I would consider, something that I could get behind? Yes, because we have seen that work. Again, the Philadelphia Eagles are a perfect example. They took Jalen Hurts in the second round because they had a quarterback that they thought was their starter on the roster, ended up being their bridge for Jalen Hurts. Now Jalen Hurts is their franchise quarterback. So there is a world where you go that route. There is a world where a new GM or even the current GM is in there and he decides, hey, I'm taking the BPA. This roster is not ready to compete and I don't like these quarterbacks. It's something that I could get behind. It's not option one for me, though. But again, we've got a long time between now and April. Jalen Milroe could be a first-round pick by the time we get to April. We know how fickle these things are, and we know how interesting the NFL draft process is. It takes one little hair to fall off a head, and then now everything changes. So we'll see how it all goes. It's going to be a fun ride, though, and we have a lot of great content planned, and we have a lot of surprises in store for you guys on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
Perfect.